Hey ho, folkies! I hope you're all well. I thought I'd take a minute to record a short video for you about the critical analysis of police response for HSP402. As per usual, I'm using a set of slides that you can find underneath this video to talk about this particular assignment. And I always have those daggy little graphics on the first slide talking about how the assignment goes together. So the first stage for this one is that you need to find a police response that you're interested in. This can be any response in the world, in Australia, in history, really. I'm giving you as much leverage as you want in that regard. Just find something you're interested in that you want to know more about in order to be able to complete this assignment. After you've done that, then you need to find some research. Now, sometimes, if you're lucky, there's a bit of research that'll be focused on the specific incident. For example, there might be some research that's been done on the Linz siege. Or alternatively, you might find broader research which talks about sieges generally, which is relevant to what you're discussing. So once you've found that research literature, then you need to find some other stuff, particularly information about that response. You'll need to go to Google, you need to look at different websites, find even videos about the different response if they're available, and pull that all together, and then you type up your response. Now, the way that you type up your response will depend on how you submit it, because you've got a couple of options for this assignment. It's not necessarily an essay set in stone. Just a reminder that this is the second assignment as part of your UTAS submitted assessment for HSP 402. It's assignment task number 4. Now, this assignment is due on the date that's set on the Milo site for you. It has a word count of 1,500 words, and that excludes your reference list, and it's weighted at 50%. So what you need to do is write a 1,500 word essay response or a 15-minute PowerPoint presentation that has an audio recording of your voice, or alternatively, you can just do a video. It's up to you. That responds to the following. You're to choose a specific past critical or emergency incident and critically analyse the police response to this incident. This means you need to read a lot about that specific incident. So I want you to think carefully before you decide which one to do. If you've been, subject to trauma based on an incident that you are focusing on, then, perhaps it's not the best idea. I don't want you to go to 7 months of counselling to get over an assignment. So think about that when you're deciding on your incident. You can then focus on your critical analysis on the police processes and practices. It can be strategic, tactical. It can even be focused on 3 massive things that went wrong with the communications, whatever, really. Looking at what the police decided and acted upon and all of that sort of stuff, and if applicable in relation to how they collaborated with key stakeholders and other first responder organisations. Now, there's a really simple framework that's outlined in a TED Talk by Bill Crawford that includes key questions, and I've structured the assignment structure around this, so I'll talk about that more in a minute. If you feel this framework's not particularly helpful and you'd rather do something else, there's a whole bunch of other frameworks that you can use. Just email me and we can talk through it. I've also got other frameworks talked about in little videos online for you, talking about critically reflective practice. So you might be able to do that. You'll need to draw on and sort of think through the set readings from a unit. It's not a requirement that you use those in your assessment item though. And that, of course, you need to find some other stuff through the library databases, through Google Scholar, to inform your response. You might even be able to read some public inquiry documents about it. And you'll need to reference all of that stuff in your response. Now, some things to think about when you're deciding on your format. Some people might find it easier to do a PowerPoint presentation because you don't have to spend a long time, finessing your writing. But others might not, and they might find that it's easier to do an essay. Some things to think about in terms of the PowerPoint is that sometimes it can be hard to submit, particularly if you're talking about a confidential incident. If this is the case, then you'll need to submit it directly to me, and you won't be able to put it in Turnitin because Turnitin makes it a public document. So When you're submitting via email, this can be difficult because sometimes the file size can be too big and it doesn't send. And if you opt for putting it into snail mail on a USB, you will definitely need to get in touch with me, because when you send USBs in the mail, it goes through the mail sorter and pops out your USB, never to be seen again. So please get in touch if this happens. We need to talk through this in advance before you do anything like that. So think about that, all that stuff, before you make a decision. The suggested structure is fairly straightforward. You need to have some sort of introduction, or for a PowerPoint presentation, it would be an overview that tells me what you're going to talk about. Then you need to have your outline of the incident, which is about 200 words. It's basically saying, what the hell happened? Tell me about that, so that I can understand the next bit. Your critical analysis then might talk about what went right, which is using that framework that I was telling you about. What research supports why this went right, basically 200 words. Then talk about what went wrong, and then what research talks about why it went wrong. And then you've got a section which is, what can we learn from this? And you'll see this is 600 words. It's the main focus of the discussion. What does best practice research say about this type of incident, and how we can move forward from it? And you need about 600 words for that overall. Then you've got your list of references. For a PowerPoint, you just put this on your last slide. For your essay, as usual, it goes at the end of your essay. Some basic tips. Third person is preferred, but you can use first person if you were actually part of this incident. But again, think carefully about whether or not you want to do that if there was serious trauma involved in those processes. Make sure you understand what policing looks like in relation to critical incidents, so you can get or think about the different things that police do well and what they need to improve in relation to a particular incident. So, for example, there might be 100 different things that went wrong. Clearly, you're not going to be able to talk all about that. So you might want to focus on a specific element that went wrong, and there might be 2 things that you can talk about in relation to that. So think really carefully about how you do that. Start by using the core readings as a launch pad for what you're doing, and then you'll be able to extend on this by finding other readings, so you've got a good understanding. Most importantly, is your incident confidential? Think about that in terms of how you need to submit it and all of that sort of stuff, so that I can mark it offline. Make sure you include specific discussions, examples about police decision making, so that your links are really clear, and make sure that you connect that to your research literature. For instance, you might say that police leadership was one of the biggest things that went wrong in the police response. If you say something like that, then you're going to need to note what type of leadership you think was used and why that didn't work, and that what type of leadership you might use down the track, so that it would go better in the future, which of course you could talk about in your section on your learnings. Making sure that you need at least 1 reference per paragraph, and in the case of a PowerPoint presentation, you'd have it in each PowerPoint slide. The pitfalls, I suppose, that you can avoid. Some people don't develop their points in detail. Instead of developing 1 point in detail and bringing in research to support their points, they list off a whole bunch of different points in short paragraphs. It's totally fine to focus on 1 thing that went wrong and 1 thing that went well. So please make sure that you narrow your response accordingly. Not having enough research literature. So they've got all of these things talking about all of these sources talking about the incident, but hardly any research literature. You haven't got your balance right. So make sure you think about that really carefully. Some people don't connect their main analytical points with research literature. So it might be that this thing went wrong, and you can talk about in detail how that went wrong. But if you don't link it in with research literature, then you're not ticking that critical analysis box. So it's going to be hard for you to pass. Not using 1.5 line spacing, having short paragraphs with less than 5 sentences, and not using subheadings to organise your ideas. The The marking rubric for this one is fairly straightforward. You've got to identify the critical and emerging issues related to that police response. Then you need to evaluate the planning and implementation, communication strategies, whatever it might be in relation to that response. And then you need to analyse the strategic and tactical decisions in relation to that as well. So you're bringing it together with your research literature and so forth in that respect. And of course, you support your argument with literature and other evidence, synthesising highly relevant information, scholarly sources, making sure that you've got accurate and consistent referencing style across both in text in your PowerPoint and in your reference list at the end of your PowerPoint, and making sure that you've done that throughout your response. Some basic guidelines there about how to structure your essay or your presentation if that's what you choose. I'm not going to tell you how to suck eggs in that regard. I know you already know how to do that stuff, but that's just there if you need it. I've got some examples of this assignment. I've got an example here of an essay, so I've got an example introduction, an example of a paragraph about what went wrong, and an example of a conclusion from the essay. I've also got an example up on the Milo site for you of a presentation that was done. That was really good. So that you can see the types of things that you might be able to cover off on and the type of structure that you need. That's it for now. I hope that was helpful. As per any of the assignments, if you've got any questions at all, just get in touch with me via email and we can, chat through it, or we can make a time to talk about it on the phone. But that's all I've got for you right now. I hope that was helpful, and please don't hesitate to get in touch if you've got any other questions. See you later.